A lot of interface people here. We packed the audience. And thank you all for being here. Just a brief introduction. In 1994, 15 years ago, I challenged the tiny task force of interface people, 16 or 17 people, to lead our company to sustainability, which we defined as operating our petroleum-intensive company in such a way as to take from the earth nothing not naturally and rapidly renewable by the earth, and to do no harm to the biosphere. Take nothing, do no harm. In other words, zero footprint. And we eventually chose the year 2020 for the target year to reach zero footprint. Here we are, 15 years into that journey of a 26-year-long journey to 2020, and we're better than 60% of the way up that high mountain called Mount Sustainability, the point at the top representing the zero footprint, zero environmental impact towards which we aspire. The book, Confessions of a Radical Industrialist, is mostly about how. How does an industrial company, petro-intensive industrial company, do this? I've picked a few passages from the book to read, hopefully to whet your appetite to read more. And I'm not sure how long it'll take me. I actually haven't timed myself, but if I run over 30 minutes, Lisa, you'll let me know. And we'll leave time, too, at the end for questions if you have them. So, with that preamble, let me begin. It doesn't make the news when the owner of a coal mine comes out against regulations that he thinks will take money out of his pocket, or when a farmer growing designer lettuce pledges to go organic, or when some boys up in Vermont say they're going to make ice cream with milk from pampered hand-raised cows. Well, most folks just shake their head and say, what would you expect? But when the CEO of a sizable industrial company like mine declares with a bit of a Georgia accent that he intends to eliminate his company's environmental footprint and become sustainable and then restorative, it does raise some questions. Believe me, I've heard most of them. I thought Anderson was a coal-eyed capitalist. I thought he was one of us. What is going on here? Who is he and what planet did he come from? So if you'll permit me to introduce myself in my own way, here goes. I was born and grew up in the small Georgia town of West Point, the third of three sons, Bill Jr., Wiley, and I, baby Ray. My mother, Ruth McGinney Anderson, was a school teacher until she married. She had to retire because even in the middle of the Great Depression, married ladies weren't allowed to teach school in West Point, Georgia. My father, William, was the assistant postmaster in town, a secure government job in those hard times. As the oldest of 7 children, he had to quit school after the 8th grade to go to work to help support his family. He did it because it was expected of him. He was plenty smart, especially in math, and with an education he could have done just about anything. I never heard him complain about it, though I knew it was a waste, and I think he did too. Maybe that's why my father was bound and determined not to let the same thing happen to his 3 boys. He made sure that we all got good educations. Bill Jr. became a medical doctor. My other brother, Wiley, grew up to be an award-winning science teacher. Well, what about me? Well, I was the youngest, so I guess I knew there wasn't going to be much money left after my brother's college bills were paid. It was a good thing I grew up with a football in one hand and a book in the other. While my mother made sure I studied hard, my father made sure I played even harder. He knew a college football scholarship would make it a whole lot easier for him, for me to follow in my brother's footsteps. West Point High School's varsity football team was on its way to the state championships when their coach, Carlton Lewis, threw an 8th grader named Ray Anderson into a scrimmage with them one afternoon. Though I was big and strong for my age, I quickly learned that, quantity has a quality all its own. The lesson was hammered home that afternoon when I tackled a big, hard-charging running back who would go on to become a high school All-State and college-level player. My head and his knee collided in a bone-rattling crash. That ended the day's practice for us both. Well, that was enough for me. My head was spinning, and I could feel a lump throbbing on my forehead. I could even see it rise. No scholarship was worth getting run down by a truck. So natural enough, I didn't show up for practice the next day. But Coach Lewis would have none of it. He left the field, found a telephone, and had a little talk with my father. William Anderson listened to the coach, then hung up the phone. My father had never, ever left work in the middle of the day, but he did that day. He found someone to cover for him and stalked outside with but one purpose in his mind, to finding me. West Point is small, so it didn't take him long to walk up and down the streets, hunt me down, and deliver the tongue lashing of my life. When he was finished, I returned to the football field, sore and chastened, but also determined to never again be called a quitter, to never say die. From then on, I threw myself into every game I played, even when it hurt, even when injuries made it dumb to be out on the field at all, even though I hated football. But quit? Never. My father made sure I got that message loud and clear. That's a memory and a lesson I carry with me to this day. Coach Lewis taught me to rise above all the obstacles, mental and physical, that get thrown in your path, and to compete, and by competing to achieve more than you ever thought possible. That was another vital lesson. From founding a company to instilling its sales force with a never-say-die approach to business, they both have paid off in too many ways to count. I also have a favorite childhood memory of sitting on the back steps of my home on a crisp, clear November afternoon, eating a pomegranate from the bush in our backyard and listening to the Georgia Tech football game on the radio. In 1945, I was an eager 11-year-old listening in as Tech's linebacker Johnny McIntosh tackled the Navy ball carrier at Tech's 5-yard line. The ball popped up in the air, and freshman defensive sideback George Matthews grabbed it and returned it 95 yards for a touchdown. A successful onside kick gave Tech the ball back, and Tech went on to win the game. I was listening again 2 years later when Dinky Bowen kicked the fourth quarter field goal to beat Navy again, 17-14. I guess I've loved Georgia Tech for as long as I can remember. 4 years later, I sat on those same steps, polishing my football shoes for West Point's Friday night game. Captain and all-star, member of a team headed for another state championship game. An assistant to Georgia Tech's coach Bobby Dodd was right there with me, recruiting me to come to Atlanta as an offensive running back. When other scholarship offers arrived from Wally Butts of the University of Georgia, Shug Jordan of Auburn, and Bear Bryant of Kentucky, there was never one doubt in my mind where I was going to college. Now, with a scholarship in my pocket and a college education at hand, there was nothing that could hold me back. I was proud and happy. So was my father, who was also more than a little relieved. But what to study? I'd always been interested in how things worked. I was good at math, and I loved ideas. Engineering appealed to me, but what kind? When I showed up at Tech, I thought I'd give aeronautical engineering a try. But a couple of weeks of classes convinced me I didn't want to design airplanes. Civil engineering. Again, I figured out pretty quickly that laying out concrete retaining walls and designing bridges and sewers was not for me. How about textiles? Well, that made some sense. There were plenty of mills around West Point when I was growing up. A summer job at one of them after my freshman year at Tech taught me a lot of practical things about textiles, but left me covered in sweat and lint at the end of every workday. For generations, textile workers had been called lint heads, and now I knew why. By summer's end, I swore I would never go back inside a mill again. As I rotated through Tech's excellent engineering courses, I found them all interesting and surely challenging, but somehow they were focused too narrowly for me. I wanted to play on a wider field, and so after my summer in the mills, I gravitated to industrial engineering.